Today is day 18 of my 90-day novel writing challenge. I have 18,000 words and I thought I would pop onto YouTube and share some of my progress notes. I love watching these videos on process and writing process, and I will have to say that it's probably been one of the most supportive activities I've done to help myself stay the course, to stay excited and inspired to continue in this challenge. I'm new to YouTube, so an introduction is in order. Well, actually I'm not really brand new to YouTube, but this is the first time I've really figured out how I want to show up on this platform. I think my previous experiences, I was feeling a type of way about putting myself out there, and also I generally don't like to be on social media because I like to do other things outside of my devices. But in light of this challenge, I have been re-inspired to show up on this platform and share some of the things that I've learned and that excite me and inspire me, because I think it is really helpful. So without further ado, my name is Hallelujah Moritz, and I'm currently working on a speculative fiction novel. Before I get into talking about what I'm writing about and just giving a little bit of background context on who I am, I figured I would share a bit about the challenge and what all it entails. So the idea for this challenge is to write 1,000 words every single day without interruption for over 90 days. A typical adult fiction novel runs about 90,000 to 100,000 words. So after this challenge, I'll have a complete novel. I want to talk a little bit about my inspiration for this challenge. Basically, I have been really sporadic with my writing over the course of many years. Life has gotten in the way. I personally, as a writer, was struggling to figure out which way I wanted to go, because, you know, there's so many things you can write about. And in that figuring out phase, I feel like I just put an extreme filter on myself in writing, and I just struggled to write. I would start projects here and there and then look at them and be like, oh my gosh, this looks way too out of my league right now, or out of my depth, or I can't manage what I think I should be doing for this, or I will have a change in taste and style for myself, and I'm like, oh, I want to do something else. So it was a confusing time. What I realized from all of that was that the most important thing for a writer who wants to write books is that you have to finish a project. Point blank, it has to be done. Before I can make any judgment calls about how good something is or what I want to be about, I have to finish something first. So then I completely flipped my approach to writing, and I said, okay, the next time I get into this, I want to set myself up to finish something. There's a little bit of backstory to this. So I have self-published a nonfiction work, and for a while I wrestled with that because I thought, man, do I really have to now stay within this realm? Like, is nonfiction all there is for me? And do I want to be championing this like it's my baby? And the answer is no. I did not want to be obsessed with my one book and be all about it to death's end. So I spent a lot of time figuring that out for myself. But in that process of having written a book before, I had burned myself out. I think burnout is something that many writers, maybe even every single writer, can relate to. It is horrible, like the worst kind of writer's block ever. Anyways, after that, I spent a lot of time thinking and meditating and healing from that burnout because it was so bad. And then I decided I needed a new approach. I needed to completely change how I wrote. I think that's where I realized that writing is less about the content at first and more about the process and the approach. It's the how you write that's more important than what you write, because it's the how you write that's going to sustain what you write. So that got me into a huge deep dive studying process. I watched a lot of videos on YouTube of people trying other authors' writing routines. In watching those videos, I picked up on a lot of patterns that I noticed about these authors. Chiefly, whatever process you're in or that you're trying or that you're working out, the outcome is always to finish something. So there's this notion on writing and not editing, and it took me a while to really wrap that around my mind and how I likened it to be. The analogy I used for myself is driving, not braking. You see those drivers on the road who constantly brake, and they are a mess. They cause accidents. I mean, it's not fun to drive around somebody who's braking all the time. And likewise with writing, it's writing, not editing. Like, you have to get those words out. You have to stop filtering yourself so early on, because quite frankly, a lot of the story changes and actually develops the further you get into your writing. I do want to add a little disclaimer here that none of this is prescriptive. I don't believe in prescriptions. I think take what works for you and try it out, experiment, but always stay true to you. Okay, now that the disclaimer is out of the way, I do want to add a little note here. I'm actually squeezing this video in between segments, just because my apartment building is quite loud and my husband works next door in the next room, and I can still hear his echo, so that's what's happening. But back to process. In order to finish, you really have to understand what stands in your way. And I think for most writers, a lot of it is the self-judgment. Like, that's a huge one, but it's also volume of words and the creative work and energy necessary to bring those words to life on paper or document. I am discursive. I digress a lot, but on the note of energy, I do want to put myself out there a little bit that I actually write using tarot and Lenormand cards. So that's a huge part of my process, and I'll share a little bit about that later. You can kind of see like some of my stash over here. But I say that because, you know, that's my flavor of creativity, and so if you're interested in stuff like that, you know, hopefully this really speaks to you. It seems to be more common, at least from my own research, and my research is not thorough by any means. My everyday person's research, that the sweet spot for a lot of writers is around 1,000 words, or the 4 to 5 hour mark window for a writing session. And as I noticed this, I began to wonder why that might be. And what I've come to realize is that it is that just amount, that Goldilocks amount of enough structure to get shit done, but it also is just enough work where you're not feeling like this is going to be an absolute pain in the ass slog through knee-deep mud. What that boils down to is sustainability. Just enough structure and just enough flexibility, that Goldilocks dose, is what allows you to continue this in the long run. And by this I mean writing. And writing really is a long game. Even if you're writing like 40 to 50,000 words, I think that's about like the young adult range. That word count varies per genre as well. But even if you're writing something shorter, you're not going to be just writing that. So throughout the course of your writing journey, you're going to be writing so much more. And so ultimately, writing is a long ride. Writing is really like running a marathon and not your casual 5K. And I thought about this and I was like, okay, how someone runs a 5K or just like a jog through the neighborhood, it is not the same way that you run a marathon or would even approach a marathon. Like, it's not the same game. And depending on that context, your approach has to match that. So that was my thought process behind the 90-day challenge of 8,000 words per day. It's very long-winded, but I think it's worth the time and effort to study process, because ultimately that's what creates efficiencies and allows for sustainability. Personally, over these past 17 days that I have completed, today is day 18, I've noticed a lot of things that happen differently from when I've written in spurts or bursts, or segments here and segments there. I think the biggest thing I've noticed is that the story changes as you write. Like, it is its own living and breathing thing. And even though I have refrained from obsessing about the editing, I think it's really in realizing how much actually can develop the further you get into the act of writing itself, that really helps facilitate the process. I took a little bit of summary notes after each day, and what I've noticed is that the first week I felt like such crap about what I was writing, but in the second week it began to pick up, and as it started to flesh out, it became more cohesive and interesting. In studying my own trends, I learned the importance of taking your emotions out of the picture of the discipline of writing. I think that has been a huge factor in how I've been able to write 18,000 words, and honestly, these have been like the smoothest 18,000 words I've ever written in my life. I just want to add a few other notes before I wrap up. I want to try to summarize the gist of my points. Basically, this 90-day challenge I set up for myself intentionally after having studied other people's processes, other writers' processes, and then evaluating myself and how I like to work, what my lifestyle preferences are for writing. I wanted to share with you what I thought through before I decided to commit to the challenge for myself. And why I'm here on this video sharing is because I'm 18,000 words in and I'm so surprised at myself. So I wanted to share this because I think it's really helpful. I want to help other writers further themselves in their craft, and so I want to plug in here more regularly. I don't know how often I'll be able to do it, but the idea is I want to plug in here more regularly so that we can all cheer each other on to finish our projects. I think I'm gonna save the other things I want to talk about for videos down the road. I will talk about what I'm writing. Actually, just a little preview. The title of my speculative fiction novel is Asher's Corridor, and currently I'm pre-releasing some segments on Kindle Vella. But anyways, it's magical realism meets thriller, fantasy, action, but in a moderate sense, meets contemplative prose a la the greats like Tolstoy, Dickens, H.P. Lovecraft. Those are some of my favorite authors in terms of style and voice. I digress again, but that said, I'm not saying I write like them, but they are the authors I aspire to write like. I also love George Luis Borges, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Italo Calvino, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Marcel Proust. So it's all of those authors meets like fantasy light. I guess that's really magical realism, and we're portal hopping, and I'm using that to get different points of views, really, more so than it being the world, but the world is also there. The world building aspect is also there, if that makes sense. Anyways, I'm honestly like really tired. I haven't had coffee this morning, but that's the gist of the novel I'm working on. In future videos, I also want to talk about my process and how I write using the cards. I think they're super helpful, and just other things about process, other things that I'm picking up as I'm going along. And also, you know, in the future, I'd like to continue doing these 90-day challenges and, you know, bring other people on board so that we can all finish together. So that's the plan, that's the blueprint, the sketch. I think that's about it for now.